My lords, today we are going to address and rank some of the most dystopian societies that exist within our galaxy, and we're going to do this by exploring their specific government types. I'll break this down into several sections, and spoiler alert, the megacorps are unsurprisingly by far the worst, but let's start with organic authorities, specifically those operating in Eugenic Hierarchy. If any report is going to get me put on a government watch list, this one is probably it. In any case, a eugenic hierarchy is defined as absolute power must be entrusted to the genetically ordained elite, the purest and most capable stewards of this civilization's destiny. Beneath them, each citizen fulfills a predefined role, meticulously tailored to their inherited genetic potential. Contentment flows not from ambition, but from simply accepting one's designated purpose. In brief, eugenics is the study of how to arrange reproduction within a human or alien population to increase the occurrence of heritable characteristics regarded as desirable. These empires have specifically gone down the route of biological ascension, and more specifically, the purity path, as they believe in a genetically pure species. Thus, they receive benefits such as increased job efficiency, council agenda speed, and their leaders have the genetic purist trait. Although clearly somewhat dystopian from an outsider viewpoint, it does appear that this empire's people actually receive no negative outcomes whatsoever, perhaps because they're genetically set up to do so, to not feel aggrieved. Grim indeed, but frankly, compared to some of what's to come, it's really not that bad. Next, we have Catalytic Command. Power is concentrated in an elite class endowed with superior genetic mutations, granting them an unparalleled authority. Operating beyond the confines of ordinary law, they wield their abilities to protect and guide society, taking whatever actions are deemed necessary to ensure its survival and prosperity. This government type is accessible to biologically ascended empires going down the mutation route. This is, in my opinion, more dystopian than the eugenics hierarchy, because at least with the eugenics hierarchy, it appears that the lower classes have been genetically modified to be content with their situation. There has been no such modification here with Catalytic Command, and furthermore, power is hyper-concentrated within the elite ruling class. Empires running this government type will see increases in research speed, faction-resourced output, elite happiness, and specialist output, as well as substantial decreases in crime. However, both workers and specialists will receive fairly substantial happiness penalties. I think this is because the elites are hoarding and controlling the best genetic mutations available to the species, and given the centralization of this power, it clearly makes this government type quite an unpleasant place to be for anyone except the ruling elites. Replicating Regency comes next. This society ensures the internal reign of its elites by anchoring power within the unbroken lineage of superior clones. Cloning technology preserves and perfects their genetic legacy, enabling a seamless continuation of leadership. Every position of influence is occupied by an improved iteration of the same exalted line, entrenching their dominance across generations. This government type is also, like the ones before it, available to bio-ascended empires, although this time they've gone down the cloning route. And I think it's quite fair to say this is probably one of the least dystopian that we will discuss today. Yes, the leaders will rule essentially forever due to the way that backup clones work, but there is no inherent pain or cruelness put upon the working class like some of the others. And frankly, this feels not that different to a standard imperial government with hereditary titles. So, rejoice, because it could be a lot worse. Nucleic Judiciary comes next, and we are getting nice and dystopian now. This government wields genetic and biometric data as tools of preemptive justice. They scrutinize every citizen's genetic code for criminal predispositions, and then they intervene before the transgression, so it ensures order through meticulous oversight. True justice is not reactive, but preventative, safeguarding society by eliminating crime at the root. Essentially, this government determines that you're guilty of committing a crime before you commit the crime, based purely on your genetic profile. This has the remarkably obvious effect of drastically reducing crime and increasing stability across all sectors and planets within the Empire. And somewhat bizarrely, it actually seems to work. This Empire society has no visible negative side effects, but perhaps that's because anyone who would complain would be locked in prison, or worse. In any case, this actually, although clearly dystopian, seems to work very well. Hybrid mandate comes next. This society mandates genetic mutation as the cornerstone of its advancement. Those who are content to remain as nature made them will face immediate internment or termination, ensuring only the genetically superior will contribute to the species' relentless drive towards perfection. Clearly, this ticks lots of dystopian boxes. Mutate or be killed. This empire oddly sees dramatic increases to elite pop output. Although it's not inherently obvious, I think that the elites are keeping the best mutations for themselves, and perhaps that is really what's going on. If that is the case, then this is hilariously cruel, as it appears they forced the lower classes to experiment with different mutations and then harvest their genetic potential for themselves. Grim indeed. The final biological government type to address is homogenous submission. This is defined as absolute loyalty is ensured through meticulous genetic selection, with only those hardwired for unwavering obedience chosen as cloning stock. This creates a self-perpetuating society where rebellion is not only improbable, but biologically impossible, securing unbroken harmony through the very fabric of its citizens' design. Thus it appears that this empire has done away with mass independent thought entirely. They have become a truly dictatorial society and simply removed any potential future opposition through genetic selection. The elites in this society gain the ability to use backup clones, and therefore will live essentially forever, ruling over their armies of completely obedient clone soldiers. That rounds off the biological authorities which I feel are suitable for this list, but we still have synthetic, cybernetic, and the megacorp ones to come. And my lords, since we're speaking of dystopia, if you want to avoid any internet censorship that's happening in the United Kingdom, and indeed the rest of the galaxy right now, you're in luck, as we've partnered with a megacorp providing virtual private networks. Using these, you may conduct espionage or other activities hidden from your respective overlords, and as such, I'd encourage you to click the affiliate link in the pinned comment or the description, and this will give you a discount off 12 or 24 months of purchase. Stay safe out there. Moving on to the cybernetic authorities now. Governments accessing these all have ascended cybernetically. They were once fully organic, but it appears to have used their mechanical prowess to bring their population closer to the machine. Sadly but unsurprisingly, this means that they can now operate in some hilariously grim ways, as you're about to find out. Starting with democratic Interlink, which is the first and only democratic government type on the list, but I think it's certainly worthy of being here. Democratic Interlink is defined as consciousness interfaces allow real-time sharing of sensory data, emotional responses, and thought patterns between full cyborgs. As a safeguard against the sensitivity of intense extra-bodily responses, emotional firewalls will filter out unwanted responses to shared emotive data packets. My lords, I think the forced deactivation of specific emotional receptors is fairly abhorrent. As a further example, this empire uses this technology to deactivate threat receptors, meaning their citizens are more likely to accept riskier work assignments. This dramatically increases their resource output. Some may say turning off a citizen's emotional receptor is a positive, because perhaps it means you can never be sad. But frankly, I would disagree. I think, to be alive, we must be able to feel, and I wonder if you could ever experience true happiness if you had never experienced true sadness. One for a debate, perhaps. But moving on to an amazing, fantastic example of a dystopian society, Oligarchic Sleepwork. Recent wetware advancements have made it possible to control people in their sleep. The subject's neural pathways are connected to servers which feed the brain computational tasks or command their body to perform repetitive work while they sleep, a real dream job. Does it get worse than this? Being controlled and forced to work while you sleep? Well, yes it does, but we'll come back to that later. This also doesn't excuse the fact that this is clearly horrendous. Unsurprisingly, this reduces worker output by 15%, perhaps because despite all this extra work they're doing, they're not getting any proper sleep and so unable to function properly in the day. Specialists, however, will see an increase in productivity, and bizarrely, and I cannot quite figure out why, but the elites see a 40-year increase to their lifespan. The rich get richer. I have no idea how. But anyway, moving on to oligarchic overclocking. In oligarchic overclocking, specialist biochips are remotely overclocked for increased production, while the ruling strata reaps the benefits, allowing them to allocate more time to politics and leisure. This empire has a unique edict which enables the activation of a gamified quota interface. This entices specialists and workers to compete for promotions and performance badges. The nature of this endless grind partially offsets the increase in productivity. And what this does is, it results in the deletion of any worker or specialist political power. They are sort of, but not quite, enslaved, whereas the elites are able to lord it over society, doing very little at all but reaping the benefits of a cybernetically enhanced life. Meanwhile, the workers and specialists compete in this sort of fake game, almost like a rat race, as they attempt to reach the status of elites. Lovely and dystopian. The final cybernetic authority to discuss is Dictatorial Cybervision. Mandatory implantation provides robust control and law enforcement tools, strengthening the regime's grip over its subjects. The colloquially named dictatorships monitor their owners and alert the authorities automatically if trouble arises. These dictator chips are essentially a hidden personal implant which uses a live feed analysis to detect and report a crime without requiring the owner's consent. So if I was, say, driving and going over the speed limit, my implanted chip would alert the authorities to that. Clearly, this is truly insane, but it also raises an ethical question. If we compare this to the biological counterpart we discussed earlier, is it better to have a chip in your brain that records you committing a crime and alerts the authorities, or have your genes scanned at birth and the crime preempted and prevented? I'll let you argue that one in the comments. These empires will, unsurprisingly, see increases in stability, and perhaps somewhat surprisingly, the people, society, is happier for it. I guess if you're not a crime-committing citizen, less crime in society is a good thing. Maybe this is a non-issue. Synthetic and megacorp authorities still to come, and as you know I'm saving the worst for last, which is the megacorps, so synthetics next. Synth authorities are government types where an empire has ascended from an organic into a synthetic, and due to this adaptation, they can hold quite different views on life and autonomy as perhaps they held as organics. Their first government type to discuss is Oligarchic Override, and it's lovely and awful, for bureaucrats specifically. Synthetic oligarchies authorize top-level bureaucrats to temporarily take over the bodies of their underperforming peers to prevent process management catastrophes. This government type, as far as I can tell, is extremely specific in its dystopian tendencies. It does appear that only bureaucrats can be taken over, not everyday workers and certainly not specialists. This results in this government type providing increased elite output at the cost of increased upkeep and also an increased unity output from administrators. Why they have stopped at just administrators is beyond me, but it is what it is apparently. Dictatorial Indoctrination comes next, and this is accessible to synthetic empires who have also adopted a virtual lifestyle. It is described as: we now exist in a fully virtual world. Nothing is true. Everything can be manipulated. With complete control over the lived environment, public opinion is ours to mould. The people will believe what we want them to believe. This is literally forced indoctrination, and the government gets some rather odd modifiers because of it. They somewhat obviously see an increase in governing ethics attraction and rule of skill, however they also receive building cost decreases, increased building upkeep, and research speed penalties. Perhaps this reflects the increased cost of housing a virtual population, and the indoctrination reduces the free thought required for pioneering research. But it's not entirely clear. Nevertheless, we move on. Imperial Transmission comes next, and this is the last of the synth authority governments to discuss. In this government, rapid mind transfer technology gives you the chance to send your fallen soldiers back into combat in fresh mechanical bodies. The same technique allows for your workers to perform highly dangerous ship repairs in space. I am slightly torn on this one. I have a small sliver of hope that the soldiers who fall in battle and are sent back to war choose to do so. Similarly, those who perform these highly dangerous jobs and die in the service of the Empire have some sort of a choice. If they do indeed have a choice, then maybe Imperial Transmission isn't so bad. If, however, it's forced servitude, dying, reborn, and sent to die again, well, that's not really ideal, is it? Interestingly, however, there does appear to be no downside from empires using this government type. They will experience bonuses in basic worker output, and their fleets will receive hull and armor bonuses as well. So, maybe it works. And it certainly could be much worse, and it is much worse. As finally, we have some of the most dystopian examples of governments throughout the entire galaxy, the megacorporations. The soulless entities designed only to extract coin from the masses and feed their ever-growing corporate bank accounts. The first megacorp to address is Corporate Neurocommerce, which is described as outmoded tools such as billboards and handheld devices have failed to capture a consumer's attention. We can now scan the minds of potential customers and beam specific messaging and emphatic calls to action directly into an individual's brain. Speaking of which, are you subscribed right now? This is truly invasive marketing. Adverts, no longer skippable or even physical, and beamed directly into your brain. There are of course levels of dystopia, but for me, this is rather horrendous indeed, and I do wonder whether this empire needs a VPN. For reference, this government type will receive increases in trade, but perhaps unsurprisingly, see rather large increases in crime. I would suggest this is because no one's getting any sleep, as their minds are bombarded with horrible adverts, leading to them going insane. Moving on. Organ usury. Under this lovely authority, the financing of organs and body parts is made accessible through flexible payment plans. Missed payments result in swift repossession or the forfeiture of agreed upon collateral. This system ensures a steady supply and demand cycle where every body part is both a commodity and a commitment. The sale and financing of body parts. Lovely. I wonder if a new liver would cost more than one that's slightly used, or one that has several decades of alcoholism on it. That for sure would be an interesting sale ad to read. I mean, amusingly I guess in some ways you could benefit from living in a society such as this, but in reality, the poor are going to get their organs harvested, and that's just how it's going to be. Sell your kidney, you can eat for a week. Sell your other kidney, well, you can eat for a few days. Despite my misgivings, citizens living under this regime actually appear to be very happy indeed, seeing vast happiness bonuses and unity bonuses. It does come, however, with a healthy dose of increased crime, and I'd bet good credits there is a black market for organs rife in this society. Imagine going to the dentist, being put under, and coming out missing some organs. Lovely stuff. We have two more left to discuss. Corporate Recollection is up next, and this is defined as this corporation deals in buying memories and then permanently erases them from the client's brain. Vivid and intense recollections are of course worth more than mundane ones. The corporation then scans the data for any useful intelligence before finally integrating it into a synthetic mind or selling it on. Now, I can certainly think of some memories I'd like to forget about. However, I'm fairly confident that those memories, pleasant or unpleasant, are quite an important part of what makes me, me. I'm also fairly confident that people could be forced, due to financial constraints, to sell their best and most treasured memories. For example, picture your child being born, perhaps your wedding day, or perhaps the last conversation you had with a parent. This mega corporation slaps a price tag on them, rips it out your brain, and then deletes it forever. This is clearly a very grim prospect. I can absolutely see, however, how people could benefit from this. Clearly, the wealthy. Why go to school at all when you can have someone waste 4 years of their life and just transfer you the relevant memories? Why experience anything dangerous when you can have some poor person risk their life for you and then steal the experience from them? The possibilities and risk for abuse within this system are clearly endless, and I have very, very little hope at all that this society could be anything other than a true dystopian nightmare. To boot, this government actually sees very little bonuses whatsoever. They simply receive a slight increase in their ability to conduct espionage via code breaking, almost like it's not worth stealing an entire civilization's worth of memories at all. And finally, I've saved a particularly grim one for last: corporate sapience. Constrained synthetic minds can be imbued into inanimate objects to create rudimentary living entities. Now these can function as a tireless servant, a loyal companion, or even a valued member of your family or business. Now, this appears quite abstract, but I'm immediately jumping to a robotic servitor. I'm also interpreting this to mean you could put someone in an alarm clock, or perhaps a picture frame, and I would sincerely hope that said person is not really conscious, because being locked in a somewhat inanimate object without the ability to act, I don't understand why anyone would want this. Empires enacting this government type simply see an increase in trade, nothing special really, and certainly, in my opinion, not worth the offset of locking loved ones away in inanimate objects. I don't understand why anyone would want this. Truly bizarre. That brings this to a close. Do you have a dystopian government that I've missed? Let me know. And remember, if you want to protect yourself online, then I would encourage you to take a look at Proton VPN and use my link for a discount.